To another episode live from the Benzinga Cannabis Capital Conference of Elevate Your Grind. We have one of my favorite guests on the show. He's been on it probably, I think might be the third or fourth time. The last time you saw him was live from the stage at the Cannabis Lab Conference. Gary Santo, the CEO of Tilt Holdings. Gary.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fucking great. Welcome back, man. It is great to see you. I love having you down here.
Thanks.
I'm sorry we can bring the weather for you.
I know I left Massachusetts and came down to rain and drizzle and cold, and that's kind of what I left.
Yeah, well, the thing is we've had a big influx of Northeasterners. We're trying to get them to go back.
Get rid of the mass holes.
Exactly. Well, that is much you, and I'm from it's the New Yorkers. There's too many of them.
Oh yeah, there's that too.
So we originally had them once they retired, they moved down here. Then the pandemic had lowered the minimum age of required moving down. So Gary, so we just kind of touched on this before we started recording, and I love this is the one thing I've always loved about you and about Tilt is recognizing the value of brands early on in cannabis. It's funny, as a lot of more markets open up, people will have brands approach them, and a lot of times the conversation is, why should I pay you a percent of my money to sell my product, right?
Yep.
You took the opposite effect. You looked at what was going on in California and some of these more mature markets. You realized that branding was very powerful and that brands have a message and there's actually soul behind it. It's not just a commoditized product. How is that bet that you've made on brands going?
It's been really good. I would say that for a company that 2 years ago had never really done a lot of branded products in general, the pivot on the operational side has been a challenge. But when we take a look, like in Pennsylvania, we really leaned into the brand partner there. We don't sell bulk anymore. We don't really sell our own brand anymore.
Yeah.
And we have no retail. But at the end of the day, I think we grew like 16% in the state, and the state contracted 8%. And that's all because we launched the brands, whether it was Old Pal, whether it was Heisman, whether it was Black Buddha, 1906, those all made a difference. And suddenly we started selling into dispensaries that weren't buying our products anymore. And we're really only carrying their own.
Yeah.
And the best part, when you looked at our margins, they were about where you want them to be. I mean, you're always thinking 40, 50% gross margin if you're running a wholesale operation. And that's spot on with where we were coming in the early years of rolling this out. And you're going to get more efficient and the margins get better over time from efficiencies.
I mean, the nice thing about it too is I love all the brands that you've brought in. It is like a mixture of a lot of the biggest brands in California coming to the East Coast. And I think that's very powerful from a marketing standpoint. Old Pal, Heisman, two of my favorite brands in the industry. I know 1906 you mentioned as well. How are you guys now? I imagine that you kind of might have had your pick of the litter early on because there were so many brands and not so many deals. You have a very unique and, to your credit, diverse portfolio of brands. Are you guys still looking at brands? How do you look towards the future of who Tilt's going to partner with?
It's almost the inverse. When we first started this back in 2021, no one really took our calls. We had to do a lot of cold calls just to find those brands. And sometimes you're not always getting the brand you think you want because it's like, well, you want to do this with me. Let's see what happens. We lucked out. We landed some really good ones right out of the gates. And together we grew the business. I think what happened in 2021, we proved out the concept. 2022 is about how do we get them all activated. I think we exited the year with 9 brands fully activated at some level. And then we added another brand this year in Coda. Now we're up to 10. But really 2023 is more about how do we optimize? So when we look at brands and we sit with them, we take a look at the market they're going into. We try to figure out what percentage of the market is realistic, because every brand tells you they want to be the number one in every market, in every product. And it just never happens.
I don't recall any of those conversations.
Well, yeah. But if you take a look and you get the realistic expectation, we say, all right, well, this is what we're going to have to do, and this is what you're going to have to do, and we're going to keep measuring it. And now you have an opportunity to help show the brands, all right, either you're getting it done, you're not getting it done, here's where we can course correct. Or if you ever get to that point, here's where we need to start thinking about other brands.
Does it make it easier for you to operate by having these brands, or you don't have to have a lot of that product R&D and branding and marketing internal, where you can just have your resources that do what they do well? I mean, you guys have the distribution, you have the channels, you have the connections, you have the salespeople, the wholesalers, the whole nine. And realistically, now you have all these great minds that are so invested in their brands that just say, hey, this is what we do. Can you support it? Does that make it easier for you to operate Tilt?
In some ways it does. I mean, we do end up doing a fair amount of R&D because most of the products need some tweaking just to go from market to market, especially Pennsylvania and Ohio, where it's medical only.
On your toes, huh? Brownie mix.
Totally. And there's always innovation, right? And sometimes it's innovation that the brands haven't even thought all the way through yet, but we'll give them our labs and our kitchens and we'll kind of play around. So you want to keep that vibrant. But I think it's having that partner who understands what they're trying to get to in the market and why this particular product represents it. That's much different than, hey, I'd like to do a gummy. Hey, I'd like to do another edible. It's like, well, everybody wants to do that, right? But if it fits with your brand and it fits with what the whole architecture is, it becomes more fun. It's easier to do. I think the biggest challenge for us really is more the regulatory front. How do we get some of these things approved? Especially, like I said, Ohio and Pennsylvania requires a little bit of creativity, but the team's pretty good at it. And I think the brands listen to us about why Heisman has to be H in Pennsylvania, right? That's a great example.
Yeah.
Why it's not cannabis, it's medical marijuana, things like that.
That one blew my mind where it's medical marijuana. I'm like, cannabis seems to hide what it is more.
I guess somebody somewhere thought that made sense.
Listen,
right?
But two great markets. I'm really enjoying seeing what Massachusetts is doing. And I kind of see that as almost the precursor to what New York could be, as it, everybody in Massachusetts wants to be a New York sports fan.
Yeah, it's the inverse. Yeah.
But it's Massachusetts seems to be doing great market, and it seems to be maturing. I mean, it's one of the premier markets I always thought was going to be great. When you look at the landscape of where Tilt is that one of the easier ones to operate because it is recreational?
I think from a product development standpoint, it is. Where it gets a little challenging is when you're doing the wholesale. You think about Pennsylvania, and you probably have 15, maybe 20 operators that control most of the stores. You get into Massachusetts, nobody has more than 3. So when you say there's 250, 275, whoever's count you're using, you're probably having to go out and bang on a lot of doors. And I think the challenge you have is it's not just about opening doors. I think you have to get deeper with the relationships and get them onto that kind of regular cadence of, hey, I'm going to order twice a month or whatever that pattern is. Don't just keep opening the new doors. Because it's real easy to get distracted by that.
So one of the things I always liked about Massachusetts is when we were looking at markets, right? I remember someone had thrown out Canada to me, and I'm like, no. And they're like, why? I go, there's 30 million people in Canada. There's 30 million people in California, and there's a lot more geography in Canada. The one thing I loved about Massachusetts was a heavy concentration of population in a small geography. So me, when I was thinking about Massachusetts, I'm like, I can get one guy in a car to cover that whole state.
That'd be a pretty fast driver. But no, I think we've paired up with our sales teams. We have field marketing teams. I think that's the key, because you make the sale, and then the next week the field marketers have to go out and then reconnect, and then the sale happens the week after. So if you're not into that cadence, if you're still in that old school limited license Massachusetts mindset, and you're waiting for the phone to ring, you're going to fail.
I think you guys have done a great job, right? We see a lot of the industry's rough right now. It's rough. Capital is not coming in, but we see these stories coming out I don't know if it's Lynn or whoever is on your team, but every story I see coming out of Tilt seems to be a positive one and moving forward. So
we're trying. I mean, it's one of those industries where you cannot have possibly thrown more at it. You go 2019 vape crisis. If that wasn't good enough, let's do a respiratory pandemic. Then we go into 2021 with supply chain issues. And I think everybody saw this kind of artificial spike as everyone came out of COVID. They all had their COVID checks. So there's a little bit more purchasing and everything. And suddenly everyone thought this is the way it's going to be. And then 2022, it sort of normalizes back again. Capital markets aren't there, but those of us that I think have built good operations, it's starting to come through now. Who's built the kind of operation that can survive in a world like this? And ironically, it's what you should have been building all along. Right. Just because the market's hot and you're making crazy money doesn't mean you should be spending crazy money at the same time. So, but like a cockroach, we're still here.
Well, we see it in cannabis, we see it in tech, and we see a lot of people, and you seem to be a great captain of the ship steering it through the storm.
Thank you. You're too kind.
Hey, you've done my show 3 times. I gotta be nice to you. So I'm excited. You guys have New York lighting up in the future. I think the markets that you have, Massachusetts, New York, great, blue collar markets, great sports markets and everything else. How excited are you guys for that New York project to start moving forward?
The way things are lining up, it's crazy. So New York is struggling to get out of its own way on adult use. You have all these farmers now with all this stranded product looking to move things. And then all but 11 towns in Long Island opt out of recreational altogether. So now there's really no competition anywhere near. I think the closest dispensary we had was already 20 miles away, and that's medical only. So, and I don't know if Riverhead was one of those towns.
And you guys are right on the way to Montauk, right?
Yeah, we're right there on, I guess, Sunrise Highway, I guess it is. When you get out that far, I lose track of what's what, but that's on Southampton. But yeah, it's going to be pretty nice. So the dispensary's coming along well. We're doing everything we can to have it open in time for summer. And now it's just a question of what are we going to have on the shelves? And we've changed what we're building. What we found is there's so much talent right there on the Shinnecock property, from cultivation, manufacturing. So while we thought we were just going to build this massive 60,000 square foot operation, we might not have to. We're able to partner with other members of the nation who want to be our producers and our providers. So we're actually creating the economic ecosystem that we had hoped for, but we just thought it was going to come from fees coming from this one operation. no, we're actually bringing in other members of the nation. So it's been pretty exciting watching the whole nation come together. And it's very much a show me operation, right? They didn't believe it was going to happen. Then all of a sudden they see a foundation. Now they see walls. Now we're doing job interviews and things like that. So, I think it's starting to really meld together nicely. So we're pretty excited.
Very cool, man. Well, I love seeing what you're doing. I love seeing the markets that you're in and focusing on doing well in those markets, bringing the brands across the country to those markets. And I'm super excited to see what you guys do in New York.
Same here.
Absolutely. Anything that we should be looking forward to this year?
No, I think keep an eye out for getting that New York dispensary open. I think that'll be a lot of fun. It'd be great to be out there in the summer months. Got some new hardware that's going to be coming out from Jupiter. So we showcased it at MJ Biz. Hopefully we'll be bringing it to market in the next month or two. One of them
like stackable vape pen, right?
One's a stackable vape pen. So it's a 510 thread cart without the mouthpiece. You just screw them together and you can blend it. The other one's already out. In fact, I was just meeting with the founder, Aiden Blend Pen, which is a device that basically you put two 510 thread carts side by side and blend. And if you're not paying attention, that will knock your socks off. I watched that happen to a good friend of mine, and she's still recovering.
Well, if you ever need someone to fly out for R&D, I'm always available to be a consultant there. But
absolutely.
Gary, it was